Your bank is charging you a fee right now, not a fee you agreed to, not a fee on your statement. A fee so structurally embedded into how money moves that most economists call it the silent wealth transfer. And it runs every single day, on every single dollar you hold, whether you're watching or not. It's called monetary inflation, and the reason nobody explains it properly is because the explanation changes how you behave. And when you change how you behave, certain institutions lose revenue. Here's what makes this worse. The tools most people use to fight it: savings accounts, fixed deposits, safe bonds, were designed in a financial era that no longer exists. You're using a map from 40 years ago to navigate a city that was rebuilt last decade. By the time this video ends, you're going to understand money at a structural level that most adults, people with degrees, with jobs, with investment accounts, genuinely never reach. Not because they're not smart enough, because nobody ever showed them the actual blueprint. Let me tell you the story of two people. Same city, same decade. Both call themselves financially responsible. Person A reads finance news every morning, follows 3 investing influencers, knows the S&P 500, closed up or down on any given day, has a brokerage account, feels informed. Person B reads nothing, follows nobody, couldn't tell you yesterday's market close. But person B has quietly built more real wealth over the same period. Not by being smarter, but by understanding one thing person A doesn't. Financial noise and financial signal are opposites. And the entire media infrastructure around money is engineered to keep you consuming noise while institutions act on signal. Here's how Institutional Desk think about retail investors. They don't call you unintelligent, they call you predictable. They've mapped your behavioral responses to market headlines with statistical precision. They know that when unemployment data drops at 8:30 a.m., retail flows will move in a specific direction within 11 minutes. They position themselves before that window. Every time. So when people say the stock market is rigged, they're right about the outcome and wrong about the mechanism. It's not rigged by manipulation, it's rigged by knowledge asymmetry, and that asymmetry is closable. That's the entire point of the next 20 minutes. Usher, the embarrassment in the title of this video, that feeling of I should know this by now, is real, but it's misdirected. You were never given the foundation. What you're about to get is the foundation. There's a cognitive phenomenon that behavioral economists named the money illusion. It sounds abstract. It is not abstract. It is running inside your brain right now every time you think about your salary, your savings, your net worth. The money illusion is the tendency to think in nominal terms, the number on the screen, rather than real terms, what that number actually buys. Your brain evolved in a world where numbers were stable. A fish cost 3 coins. Next year, 3 coins. The number meant something fixed. That world is gone. But the brain wiring stayed. And so when your savings account shows you $10,000 today and $10,200 12 months later, your brain registers growth, progress, safety. What it doesn't register automatically. If prices rose 6% over that same period, your $10,200 commands less real purchasing power than your original $10,000 did. You made money on screen. You lost ground in reality. This is not a minor quirk. This is the single most profitable cognitive bias in the financial system. Banks, Governments and large institutions understand that people respond to nominal numbers. So interest rates get set, fees get structured, and products get marketed around what looks like a gain, while the underlying real position quietly erodes. The correction isn't complicated. Yeah, but it requires a mental habit that almost nobody builds because almost nobody teaches it. Every financial number must be deflated before it means anything. What did it buy then versus what does it buy now? That delta is your real position. Everything else is theater. Here's a concept that economics textbooks mention once and never return to, but that quietly determines whether wealth moves towards you or away from you every single month. It's called the velocity of money, and it works like this. Every dollar that enters the economy moves. It gets paid as a wage, spent at a store, deposited in a bank, lent to a borrower, paid as a fee, reinvested, paid again. The speed at which dollars circulate, the velocity, determines who captures value along that chain. People who sit at high-velocity nodes, who own assets that money flows through rather than assets money flows past, accumulate. Rental income is a velocity node. Dividend income is a velocity node. A business that processes transactions is a velocity node. A savings account is not a velocity node. It is a dead end in the chain. Money enters, sits, loses ground to inflation, exits at a lower real value than when it arrived. So the real deflation exercise isn't just math, it's a map. Where does money flow in your life? Which positions you hold are velocity nodes, generating flow, and which are dead ends, storing flow that evaporates. Most people have never drawn this map. Most people would find, if they drew it, that the vast majority of their financial activity lives in dead-end positions, not because they're poor, but because dead-end positions are what gets marketed to people who haven't built this map yet. And here's where it gets structurally interesting, because the answer to that question is almost never what financial media tells you it is. Pull up any finance channel and they'll show you a compound interest chart. The hockey stick curve. Money growing slowly, then explosively. You've seen it 100 times. What they never show you is the mirror image of that chart. The same mathematical curve that builds wealth when your assets compound also destroys it when your liabilities compound. And the cruel asymmetry is this. The compounding rate on debt, particularly consumer debt, credit facilities, revolving credit, is structurally higher than the compounding rate on most accessible investments. Sure, credit card debt at 22% annual interest compounding monthly is mathematically impossible to outperform with standard retail investing. The curve works against you at 3 times the speed it can work for you, unless you have access to instruments and leverage that retail investors typically don't. This is not a coincidence of market forces. Interest rate spreads, the gap between what banks charge to lend and what they pay to borrow, are institutionally protected. The wider that spread, the more money flows from households to financial institutions. The spread has widened every decade since the 1980s. So if you've ever felt like you're running but not moving, like income rises but the gap doesn't close, this spread is a structural contributor, and understanding it is the first step to designing around it, rather than just running harder inside it. The answer requires understanding one more layer, and it's the most counterintuitive one in this entire video. What we've covered, the money illusion, velocity nodes, compounding asymmetry, the interest rate spread. None of this is information you needed a finance degree to access. None of it required a Bloomberg terminal. It required someone to explain the mechanics without a product to sell at the end. Most finance content skips this layer entirely. Not because it's complicated, because an audience that understands these mechanics is significantly harder to sell financial products to. Here's what's left. Two structural pieces. That one of them is the behavioral framework. Why people who intellectually understand everything we've covered still make the same mistakes, and the specific cognitive rewiring that interrupts that cycle. The second piece is the one that tends to reorder how people think about their entire financial life. Not because it's revolutionary, but because once you see it, the financial decisions you've been making look completely different than they did before. If you've ever made a financial decision that felt right in the moment and wrong in retrospect, the next 8 minutes is the explanation for that pattern and the exit from it. Behavioral economics has a term for what happens between knowing the right thing and doing the right thing. The intention-action gap. And in finance, that gap is not a willpower problem. It is a systems design problem. Your financial decisions don't happen in a rational vacuum. They happen in an environment, and that environment has been professionally optimized to produce specific decisions. One-click purchasing, frictionless credit, auto-renewal subscriptions, upsell flows at checkout. These are not accidents of convenience. They are behavioral architecture, designed by teams of psychologists to reduce the time between impulse and transaction. The counter-architecture, the design that works for you instead of against you, is built on 3 principles that have nothing to do with budgeting apps or spending trackers. Principle 1, automate the direction, not the amount. Automatic transfers into assets should run before discretionary spending has a chance to compete with them, and not because you lack discipline, because your discipline should never be tested by design. Principle 2, introduce friction into every liability decision. Want to add a subscription? 48-hour rule. Want to finance a purchase? Write the full interest cost out by hand. Not to guilt you, to defeat the speed architecture that retailers paid to install. Principle 3, build a financial identity before building a financial strategy. People who consistently make better financial decisions don't have more willpower. They have a stronger identity narrative. I am someone who owns assets. That identity filters decisions at a pre-conscious level, far more effectively than any budget. The correct financial map for today is not about picking the right product. It is about designing the right environment, one where the behavioral architecture works structurally in your direction. Velocity nodes can be built small. A side income stream is a velocity node. An index fund with automatic contributions is a velocity node. A renegotiated interest rate on existing debt creates a velocity gap. Capital is not the barrier. Architecture is. Most people think about their financial life as a series of transactions. Earn, spend, save, invest, repeat. This is a horizontal model. Linear, additive, slow. Institutional wealth doesn't operate horizontally. It operates vertically, stacking income streams on top of each other so that multiple flows compound simultaneously. A property that generates rent while appreciating. A business that pays a salary while building an asset that can be sold. Equity in a company that grows while paying dividends. The vertical model isn't available only to the already rich. It's available to anyone who stops optimizing one horizontal stream. How do I earn 10% more? and starts architecting multiple, smaller vertical stacks. How do I create a second flow, however small, that compounds independently of my primary income? The interest rate spread only defeats you when all your financial activity is horizontal and linear. The moment you build even one vertical asset stack, something that compounds independently, you change the geometry of your financial life. The spread becomes background noise. This is not a get-rich-quick reframe. This is a get structurally correct reframe. The timeline is longer. The results are more durable, and the starting point is smaller than most people think. And the silent wealth transfer, inflation, monetary erosion, the dead-end trap, is real, is structural, and is running continuously. But it is not unstoppable. It is stopped by understanding velocity, stacking flows vertically, and designing an environment where money moves through you rather than past you. The correct financial map is not a product list. It is not a stock-picking framework. It is this: know your real position, identify your dead ends, build at least one vertical compounding asset, design behavioral friction into liability decisions, and measure everything in real terms rather than nominal ones. That map doesn't require wealth to start. It requires clarity. The embarrassment in the title of this video was never yours. But it was placed there by a system that profits from financial confusion, from people too overwhelmed to audit their own accounts, too ashamed to ask basic questions, too uncertain to challenge the products they've been sold. That system is not malicious. It is rational. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your job is to stop being an output of it and start being an agent inside it, with your own architecture, your own map, your own velocity. The question I want to leave genuinely open, not as a cliffhanger, but as a real structural question worth sitting with. Every major financial literacy study across every country finds the same thing. People with lower financial literacy pay more, earn less on savings, and carry more debt. If that pattern is this consistent and this well documented, why has financial education never been prioritized at a systemic level? And what would actually change if it were? That question has an answer. It's not a comfortable one, and it might be the most important one you spend time on this year.